every single person is striving for good, even when they do the stupidest things in the world. I got pissed off as hell. There's a difference between decision making and problem solving. When you hit the root, it's gonna sting. It's like, ooh, I see it now.
Connor, welcome back. And you just informed me before we hit record that there's another child within the Gallagher family. Like,
Yeah,
what is going on?
It's something in the water down here in North Carolina, I think.
That's a really bad joke right now.
You know what? Oh my gosh.
For those of you guys who don't know, we're recording the week after the hurricane.
Yeah.
But honestly, thoughts and prayers with everyone down there in the Southeast, man. We've been praying for you guys big time down there. We know it's a disaster. But yeah.
So. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. My wife is from Asheville and that place is underwater. We've been looking at the footage and everything. It's sad. I heard there's like 1,000 people missing. So yeah, prayers out to all those families and everything. And
oh my God, I did not know about that. 1,000 people are missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's amazing. One of the things I was thinking about that, I'll get back to the grandbaby in a second, but Larry, it rained for like 2 days in North Carolina, and that's what happened. Right. So imagine that was hard rain for 2 days, but that shows you like the level we're always living at. We're always at overflowing levels. I mean, 2 days is nothing. What if it rained for 40? we would need an ark with Noah.
We would.
So I mean, it's what damage can be done in such short period of time. We're always living on the edge. So we need to just be grateful for what we have. But yeah, the day before the storm came, my son's wife gave birth to their first baby, little Beatrice. And so that's exciting. So I had a grandbaby like 4 or 5 months ago, had a baby about a month ago, 5 weeks ago. And then I had another grandbaby, like 5 days ago or whatever. And all little girls. So, it's pretty awesome. It's fun.
The call that I was on right before this one, it was, so I'm heading to Italy for a speaking event here in February to speak to our U.S. military out there. And so I was speaking to some of the master chiefs and that kind of thing who were putting it on. And I had to, so it was supposed to be a 30-minute call, turned into an hour. And I'm like, hey, I just want to let you guys know I gotta head out here and in like 2 minutes because I've got a podcast interview. And they're like, oh, who are you interviewing? Like, and they're like, is Matthew McConaughey coming back? I'm like, no. I was like, I got somebody better. I was like, not that everybody loves Matthew. I was like, but this guy's got a story. I was like, his name's Conor Gallagher. I was like, he's got 16 kids. And the Master Chiefs were like, what? I was like, yeah. And one guy was like, I'd rather go to war than try to raise 16 children. I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. But yeah, but so 16, you have 8 sons, 8 daughters. Like,
yeah.
How does that even happen?
I got in touch with my feminine side as I got older. So I started having all these girls because they're all top heavy boys, bottom heavy girls. And so, yeah, it's just the luck of the draw and the balance there. But I like the girls better. I mean, they're just sweet and kind. And I've only had one girl like who's gone, like raised all the way. Yeah. There was no drama, no teenage garbage with her. Like I hear nightmares from all these other guys about their teenage drama with their daughters. And I was like, seeking therapy from my 16-year-old daughter. She was so mature. It was like, honey, how do I handle this? I mean, she gives advice to me to this day at 21. And so she was just an outlier. So I could see the 12. No, I have a 13-year-old daughter and there's a little drama in there. There's a little drama. But I think that kind of like falls into the whole like structure of well-ordered family, what I'm trying to help guys do and girls. But I mean, it's to build systems, to build an environment that minimizes that garbage. I mean, we allow things like teenage girl drama, for example, to kind of run our lives. And we have to take ownership and say, no, we're the architect. We're going to build the environments. Like they didn't create that drama in their own head. They're getting it from other places. It's contagious. It like spreads like a disease through school systems and social groups and technology. And mom and dad have to like buck up and like put the right boundaries to minimize those kinds of things. You're always going to battle nature. You have hormones developing in a human body. I'm not saying it completely goes away, but the drama that people complain about is 10 times worse than it really should be. And it's 10 times worse than it was when we lived in more isolated lifestyles. I'm not saying go live on Little House on the Prairie and, live off the grid. I'm not saying that at all. Even in a busy city, you can build an infrastructure around yourself to where the environments that your kid is going into and associating with each day is more wholesome, more healthy, more spiritual, so that it keeps that drama down to a minimum. And I'm amazed at how much mom and dad just become victims of that situation and let the outside forces just storm the gates. It's like parents, it's like immigration. Like they have no walls. They have nothing to prevent the outside world from just coming in. And I'm saying you got to build the walls to some extent. You got to be intentional about how high that wall is.
I agree with you, man. I mean, especially with like as many moving parts as you guys have, but also like I think you need to be very yeah, we're gonna be talking about discernment today, right? And you have to discern like who do we allow into this ecosystem that we call our family, right? And what do we welcome and what do we not, right? And I didn't know that though about so you didn't have 8 boys in a row, did you?
No, I think we had like, let's see, I guess it was we had one girl in the first 7 kids. I think that's what it is. Yeah. So it was like 6 boys and one girl, I think.
Oh, ho, ho.
So it was just very, very top heavy guy. Yeah.
That's
Yes. My
unreal.
second was a girl and then a bunch of boys. Maybe that's why she's so chill. She was just surrounded by these guys, but I think it's largely God-given temperament, which we'll talk about with relationships when we talk about temperament, because
Yeah.
they all come out hardwired in a different way.
Mhm.
And the secret to success with relationships, Larry, in my opinion, is to have relationships with real people that God made versus the people we want them to be. It's such a simple idea, but when you really drill down into that, it makes a huge difference. And maybe we'll talk about that.
I would actually love that. So like for those of you guys who are tuning in, this is the 3-part series. This is the third part of 3 series with Conor here. So we've talked about the first show we talked about vision and unity. The second one just a few weeks back was metrics and systems, and now it's relationships and discernment. And to be honest, like I've loved this book and I've loved your message and I've listened. I don't listen to my own shows, but I've listened to yours because I'm like, I really need help with this myself, even though I only have 4, you have 16. But there's a lot of things that we've implemented that um quite frankly, I can't think of how we didn't operate with them beforehand. But like this one, the relationship factor, the discernment, how we make choices, but the relationship, the human, you've got one chapter in here on human nature, the other one, your God-given temperament, and chapter 15, which is tools to improve your relationships. But I mean, I don't want to say that one of these is more important than the other, but the story I'm telling myself, Conor, is that without cohesive, connected relationships where people in your home feel safe to be the most authentic human being that they are in that environment, like there's got to be a lot of safety that you guys provide. There's got to be conversations to welcome such a thing. There's got to be connections that are made that quite frankly maybe the rest of us don't know how to do very well, but I'm so intrigued to hear more about how we create more connection and more depth in our relationships under our own roof.
Yeah, let's get into it. So I think first, I always start with business and the analogy of business. So if you're running a business, think about how much improvement we've made in the modern world at doing assessment tests, right? So let's kind of go back in history. You come back from World War One, you come back from World War Two. It's right after the real industrial revolution is in full blast. There's assembly lines everywhere. There's huge factories, textile mills, auto plants, and you come back, you were a private in the army or whatever, and you get a job at one of these big factories. You check in every morning, you salute, you say yes sir. They tell you what a job to do, a task, and that's it. There's not much thinking. It's just you're an automaton. You're a part of the big wheel. I don't know if you've seen the movie Modern Times with Charlie Chaplin, but there's a famous image of he kind of gets into this big
I
gear
don't
and like
remember that one.
roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gets into the gear and he like rolls through the gear, showing that I mean, this is back, I guess he did this, what, in the 1920 or upper teens, but it's showing that the modern man is getting eaten alive by the machines, right? So it's kind of prophetic because it's, he had no idea what cell phones were going to bring to us. Here's the point though. They had the management executives, they had no concern for figuring out what a guy's unique ability was. They had no idea how to test those things. Well, over time, psychology, one of the good things that psychology's done for us, and it hasn't done a ton of good, but it's some good, it's that it said, okay, look, let's have these tests, these strengths tests. What are your natural talents? What are your natural proclivities? And so businesses, as the workforce became more intellectual as opposed to just physical, what they started doing is they started saying, well, we can't ask a scientist to be an artist and an artist to be a scientist. It's just not right. So let's test this guy, see where his natural strengths are, and try to put him, if he's analytical, we'll put him in the accounting department. If he's really introverted, probably not in sales, maybe more, maybe something more analytical or administrative. If he's really extroverted and outgoing and a high communicator, maybe he's in sales. It wasn't until the 60s or 70s that we really kind of started doing that. Okay. So it's kind of a new thing in the modern world, right? So by now, Larry, we have so many good assessment tests out there. Okay? We know Strength Finder. A lot of people do Strength Finder. It's really cool. You know that one?
I love that one. That was
Yeah.
one of the most fascinating books, dude, that I read that book like, gosh, I think like 13, 14 years ago when it first came out. I remember like a few of my coworkers like raving about it. I was like, I gotta check this thing out. I love that book.
Yeah, and it's great. And so, if you're hiring, say you're hiring like a whole bunch of people every year, they've really mastered it. Like, okay, let's implement that. Let's give our final applicants, not every applicant, but our final applicants, give them that test and see what they are, because it's not just about finding out who they are, but how the chemistry is going to work with other people, right? So there's other things. There's a great one now called Working Genius.
Ooh.
And that kind of figures out, it's an awesome one. Working Genius, highly recommend it. And what that does, I could talk forever about all of these, but what that does is it basically says there's 6 steps to any kind of creative project. And here is where you naturally fit in that process. Like you're better at the front end versus the back end versus the middle. It's a really cool thing. Like your ideation guy, like you have the ideas, or you're like tenacity and you go out and like solve it yourself, or you like to delegate. So it's another test that's kind of getting popular, Working Genius. There's other things. And we have about 5 different assessment tests that we give to our people that were the last applicants before we hire them. So we get 2 or 3 applicants left at the end. We give them 5 different assessment tests because we're trying to look at all these scores and say, how is this going to fit the team? I hate turnover. I hate setting up somebody for failure. So we invest a lot of time and money into trying to make sure that they're the right fit. Now, as I was learning this stuff as an executive, I started just going home and giving my wife the test just for fun. And we always had fun going back. And she's like, your score's not that. That's not the way you are. And I'm like, well, I'm like that at work. I'm just not that way at home. It really gives interesting conversation. And then you understand each other better when you're having conflict. So when you're fighting like hell, you're pissed off at each other, you want to wring each other's necks, then you realize, okay, God kind of made this person in this way, and I have to respect that. And how do I, instead of like fixing that problem in my wife, or fixing that problem in my 17-year-old son, or fixing that problem in my 13-year-old, how can I like jujitsu this sucker, right? And like turn it into a strength? How can I take this and look intentionally? And this is where we just have to be competent and creative. We have to bring our brain to parenting. Like we just have to do that. When we see something that's driving us crazy, we got to understand, Larry, that every single person is striving for good, even when they do the stupidest things in the world, right? Even when somebody, God forbid, commits suicide, they're actually trying to do some kind of good thing, which is to escape a pain or something to that effect, right? Everything somebody does is a pursuit of some good. Now, it's a perceived good. It might not be a true good, but there is some degree of seeking out some kind of good. That doesn't mean they're not morally culpable. They are, but we have to see that the natural desires of the human nature is to perfect itself. We just go about it the wrong way all the damn time. So when you appreciate that with your kid and you've given them a different assessment test and you see this is the way God hardwired. This is their DNA. This is the way they are. This kid of mine is highly analytical. This kid of mine's highly creative. This kid of mine is introverted. This kid of mine is extroverted. And then their shortcomings are revealing themselves to you. If you've done the assessment test and talked to them about it, you can better walk through the difficult and stressful moment and help them see how their temperament is kind of driving them in a certain way. But if they can just make a 10-degree adjustment, then they're going to accomplish great things. What's the difference in a guy who's extremely pissed off and it leads him to do terrible crimes versus a guy who's pissed off and channels that energy towards something awesome and powerful and conquers great thing? Like if Elon Musk wasn't the entrepreneur, he'd probably be like the world's greatest bank robber or something. You know, I mean, he would be something else,
That's
right?
so true.
So, you know, I think, and so that's the general idea of why you should do assessment tests. And I think the greatest assessment test ever given was actually one created by an ancient Greek doctor. His name is Hippocrates. So doctors to this day take something called the Hippocratic Oath.
Yes.
And that's where they say they will do no harm.
Do no harm.
Right?
Yeah.
You know it, right? So that's the Hippocratic Oath that's named after this doctor called Hippocrates. And to just real quick, I mean, tell me to stop if you want, but he said that there's basically 4 temperaments in people. Like you can be one of 4 things, and everybody's primarily one or the other. Choleric or choleric, some people say. And he based these on like he thought there was different chemicals in their body like producing this. And he was wrong about the science, but pretty darn good for an ancient Greek. But as time has moved on, we've seen that these 4 temperaments are real. So the first is choleric. This is a very hard-driven personality, a conqueror. I know, Larry, you're choleric. I can already tell just a little bit of, you know, you're a type A guy. When you commit to something, you're going. It's just, you can, you know, but the bad part of that temperament is you can be a bull in a china shop. I don't mean you, but yeah, you, because you're choleric. I can tell, you know, that's what drives you to do awesome things, you know?
I can absolutely be the bull in the shop. I've been
Yeah.
told that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but, you know, so St. Paul was choleric. I mean, he was like, he could get stoned, whipped, shipwrecked, and he kept going. And he never lost faith. He just kept going. So that's one great temperament. My wife is choleric. She's a very hard-nosed, driven person, you know. Then there's sanguine. That's the life of the party. A lot of times guys like you will need to have a best friend that's a total goofball because it lightens you up. You know, it's like, you know, I love my best friend growing up was a total goofball. That's called sanguine. And they're fun loving. Now, the great thing about them is they're so fun loving, they lighten the mood. But the bad thing is sometimes they don't take things serious enough, right? They're just so lighthearted. They don't kind of get serious about things. So they laugh off problems when they should probably buckle down. And then there's melancholics like me. And that's the person, just like we hear melancholy. They're deep thinkers, they're philosophers, they're artists, but they also like, you know, are drug addicts and addicted to everything and commit suicide way more than any other temperament because they're inclined towards depression, you know? So they do amazing things, but they feel things so deeply, they take things so personally that it kind of cripples them sometimes. And lastly, there's the phlegmatic. And think phlegm, like things go real slow. A phlegmatic does kind of move slow, but they're a peacemaker. They don't rock the boat. They don't like conflict. They always want to kind of like clean up everything. They don't get up and move quickly, but when they do move, it's steady Eddie. Like once they start moving, they're going to stay good. They're marathon runners. They're not sprinters. And so they might be out of shape for a long time because they don't have the energy to start working out. But once they start, they're creatures of habit and there's no stopping them because they just stay, keep going. So those are the 4 temperaments: choleric, sanguine, melancholic, phlegmatic. I give a lot of description of them in my book and in my videos. And it's an assessment test that really kind of came out in like 200 BC. And through all these centuries, Larry, philosophers and psychologists have still said, yeah, these work pretty well. So I really encourage people to look those things up online and figure out what you and your spouse and your kid is, because it just sheds so much light on why we do what we do.
You know, it's it's interesting about the Hippocratic Oath. I'm just digressing here for a second because I was in medical device sales, and we always used to joke with our surgeons. We're always like, that Hippocratic Oath is so hypocritical because you actually do hurt people from time to time. And they would
Yeah,
just laugh.
for
They,
sure. Yeah.
it's kind of a joke between the two of them. Um, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So do you give assessment tests to your kids?
Yep.
That's what
I
you
sure
do.
do. Yeah. I
Now,
mean, all
what
of these tests that I give my employees, I give them all to my kids.
and like so what age would be a good age to start that? Because obviously you're not giving this to like little kids, right?
Yeah. I mean, definitely middle school.
Okay.
Like,
Middle
and
school.
now they
Okay.
might not be able to take it themselves, but like you can kind of sit there and take it with them.
Okay.
They can answer questions like, these questions. Would you rather go to a party or would you rather sit in the woods and under a tree and read a book by yourself? I mean, these questions are simple, that kind of stuff. And so kids
Yeah.
can answer that, but you might
Yeah.
have to guide them through it, a little bit. It's fun. And sometimes they're free. Sometimes they cost, $25, $50. But I don't care what assessment tests you do. Find 10 of them that you like, 5 of them that you like, and just start doing them. And after a while, you start getting a new picture of each of your family members. And it's really quite beautiful.
Can you send me because what I'd like to do is I would really love to put just maybe 3 of these or something like that you like the most in the show notes.
I will.
And that'd be awesome because that way the guys could be like, to be honest, like I would love to try one of these myself.
Yeah.
Is there anything you recommend for kids who are younger than middle school? So like, is there anything that like an elementary school kid should do or take?
Well, the temperament test, is so fundamental. I am convinced that you can kind of tell a kid's temperament as an infant. Now, believe
Really?
it or not, I'm serious. I'm really serious. That could be a whole nother hour-long conversation. But I got a 5-week-old, all right? And I know she's phlegmatic. And it's where my wife and I are really versed in this. I mean, it might sound hard. You actually go talk to some child therapists and stuff. They'll tell you that personality is largely set when they come out. It's incredible. Okay. And here's another proof that I have for that. I had twins, and anybody that's had twins knows this better than even if you have a kid 2 years apart. When you have twins, you feed them the same, you clothe them the same. They 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 sleep in the same room. They experience mom and dad at the same point of life. Everything's identical. And yet, how the hell do they end up so freaking different? And they're different as infants.
Mm-hmm.
Not all infants are like we look at infants and just like, oh, all infants are the same. They poop, pee, sleep, cry. That's it, right? No, you have 2 infants side by side and you're looking at them. They're totally different. Their temperament, they cry differently. They fuss differently, different things. One of my kids would like jolt every time he heard a bang in the background, which in my house, it's like,
Every
it's
second.
just kaboom, everything. And the other kid never bothered him at all. Well, that told you something about this temperament. Like if they jerk when you touch them or they don't, like all of these things can be seen very, very early on. I don't pretend to be, an expert in early childhood development or anything. Okay. But just experientially, I am 100% certain that most of that temperament is on display for the astute observer. And the first couple months, you can tell a lot about what that kid's going to be like much later on. And I also think you can see kind of the early signs of the vices that they're going to struggle with later on. So, for example, this is crazy. I find it fascinating, but like we had one little kid, her name's Lucy, and she's 5 now. And from the earliest age, like when she was hungry, she would flip out. And she just always craved food, whether it was nursing, whether it was a bottle. She had to have a pacifier. She's always had to have something going to kind of keep herself at peace. It was her comfort food, so to speak, from very early on. And she's 5. And I'm telling you, she's going to struggle with gluttony the rest of her life. From the time she was old enough to walk and crawl, she's sneaking into the damn pantry and sneaking stuff. Like she just craves to make herself feel better by consuming things.
Mm-hmm.
That kid is going to be prone to being overweight or maybe drug problems or drinking problems. Like you have to be aware of it. Now she's a perfect angel of a little girl. 5. I mean, she's just one of my favorites. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but you can see she has that propensity towards self-indulgence. She just does. And you have other kids where like they never cry. My wife would joke like, I have to remember to feed the kid because he never cries. It's just so laid back and calm. And that kid's skinny as a rail. He has to remind himself to eat because he's just so this stuff is real. And that God-given personality, I swear to you guys, like it's present from day one, and you just have to know how to look for it. So I'll give you a link for the Greek temperament test. You know, your 5-year-old can't take the test, but you can take it for your 5-year-old and see what's going on there, and then read about their temperament. It's a lot of fun. It's very helpful.
How has this helped you approach conversations, connection, depth of the relationship for you as a dad? And so that's one question. So like, how have you leveraged those assessments to like really get deep with them, right? So that's number one. Number two, how do you bring, as a dad, how do you bring the best out of them based on some of that information that you've learned about them in the assessment, or just how they operate?
Yeah. So imagine you have a kid like in a wheelchair, right? You're not going to be able to do the same things with that kid as you would other kids. You're just
Okay.
not. You're not
Right.
going to be, going on a hike in the mountains with that kid. It ain't happening, right? But you're going to develop a completely different kind of relationship with them. Maybe you're doing other things. And that kid, maybe you kind of try to get them into something, arts or music or something that they can do sitting on their butt, right? And you're going to embrace that because you love this kid. You're going to help that young child find the things that they can do that fit their physical body, right? Well, same thing with the temperaments, right? So I can see some of my kids who are more inclined towards the arts. I try to foster that. I see some kids who are much more inclined towards like analytical and science. I got one kid now who's that, and I've really encouraged him. Maybe I love philosophy, but like, Peter, he's 18, got a beautiful girlfriend. He's working for a financial planner. He's in college. He's a great kid. I'll talk about him more in a second when we talk about how do I get real with them. There's a great story there, but I saw from very early on, he's good at math, he's good at science. So I lead them towards, accounting, finance, that kind of thing. Don't look, I love philosophy and literature, but you probably shouldn't be studying Shakespeare and Plato all the time. You need to go be an accountant somewhere and make a lot of money, and so that kind of thing. So you take their God-given temper. People are usually enjoy doing what they're good at. And I don't want my kids to choose careers that they suck at. That's miserable. And you talk to dads all the time, probably, who are stuck in the rut because they're doing something they don't enjoy. So pay attention to your little guys. They're going to tell you as they're growing up what their natural propensity is. Steer them in that direction in college or trade school or whatever it may be. Now, you asked, how do you get real with the kids? When Peter is sanguine, remember I was talking about sanguine, the life of the party, goofball. He's a little guy, and he was like 4 or 5, and he could like imitate characters he saw on TV. He can dance, he can sing. He's just a fun kid to be around. But he's also a jokester that would poke fun at his older brother, who's a klutz, who's very melancholic like me, a very deep thinker, but he feels deeply. The melancholic, his name's Patrick, who he's now, by the way, in seminary to study for the priesthood, which I'm very
Wow.
proud of that. He's a great kid now. But Patrick was very sensitive growing up, and he was awkward. He had 2 left feet, 2 left hands, and his younger brother was all American, good at everything, right? So I got pissed off as hell at Peter for a long time. I was sick and tired of the cool guy kind of picking on the nerd, so to speak. And Patrick wasn't a nerd, but on the border of nerd, right? And I remember bullies in school, and I freaking hated it. So I perceived my own son at like 10 years old, 11 years old as a bully. And it drove a big wedge between me and Peter because I thought, okay, you're Mr. Cool. You're good at everything and you know it. And you're rubbing it in your brother's face. And I went to the defense of the older son, who I felt like was the victim here. Well, my wife came to me one day. She says, Peter just thinks you don't like him. And I told her, I was like, I mean, I like him, but I don't like people like him, you know? And she said, no, you do, Conor. Your best friend, Ryan Monk, is just like him. He's just like him. You're just going to the defense of your son, which is good, but you love this personality. You love these people. Those are your friends because they have to ease up your hard edge. And when I heard that, I realized I have to embrace this kid's personality. And now Peter, he's like one of my best friends. He lightens me up. He lightens the mood. We have a cigar every Thursday night. We sit around and we smoke a cigar. He's in college. He comes back and smokes a cigar with his old man and brings his girlfriend and some buddies. We've become like best friends because I need a personality like him and he needs a personality like me. But I was having conflict with this little kid, but I wasn't fully appreciating what he could end up becoming. So that little story is like, how do I get real with them? Every personality is given to them by God for a reason, and each of them can relate to me in a special way. I have to find that out and embrace it. And I didn't always do that, and I try to do it now.
That's a really, I mean, good on your wife, for calling that out, and it's interesting. I've a very similar reaction to bullies and that kind of thing. And my 16-year-old is a lot like maybe Peter, right? He's very humble, very good kid. But he's one of those kids. He's like the starting center on the football team, but I mean, you would never know because he's not a showboater or anything like that. But he's very strong, very very strong. Yeah, he's a force to be reckoned with, to say the least. He's in the 900 club as a sophomore in his high school, which is nuts. But he likes to, he'll unleash that strength sometime on his brothers, which
Yeah.
they can't keep up with him. And I do the same thing you do, where I'm like, dude, don't even try it. Like, and he could take me out. Like, there's no problem. Like,
Well,
but
don't let them know that yet. Like
oh, he's well
they
aware,
need to have a little
unfortunately.
fear of dad. Just a little fear.
Well, luckily dad is taking jujitsu now. So like, I might not be as strong, but I can put him in chokeholds now, which is good. But, yeah, you're right. You have to have a little bit of danger to you, right, as a father. But,
That's right.
it is interesting, like how a personality like that can impact a connection. And it has the funny thing about Peter is your experience with him versus your experience with the bullies has really not much to do with him. It has everything to do with your experience and my experience with bullies, right? And it's
Got it.
just I could really relate to, like, no, I love him. I like him. There's other people that I don't like that are like him. Like, that I kind of get that. But let me ask you this, and I want to be careful with this one, but I've always been told, don't ever label your kids. It's like, oh, he's my sensitive one,
Hmm.
or that's the one that might have issues with gluttony or addiction later on, or that's the one with this, or that's the one with that, though. Or even like, even if it's a positive label, like my stepmom in particular, like I'm always like, oh yeah, he's my athlete. She's like, careful with that. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, just be careful with the labels you put on your children, because you're sold on that label, but that might not be who they are. And I was like, oh, it's really interesting. So, like, when it comes to assessments, relationships, personality types, and all that, what is the fine line, do you think, or maybe positive, negative of saying, oh, well, that's that type of kid?
I actually think, well, that's why assessment test labeling, to use that term, is actually a good thing versus the labels that we typically give. Like,
Hmm.
I don't want to say this is my athlete or this is my smart kid. I mean, it's not,
Right.
that's harmful, right? But something like choleric, sanguine, melancholic, phlegmatic, or one of, like, if you're doing Myers-Briggs, ENFP or INTJ, these are strength finder. You have these different labels. Oh, you're a strategic thinker, or you're more of a social animal, or whatever. I mean, these labels, they're so foundational to our personality. I don't think they do a lot of harm by labeling it, because it's not saying what you can and can't do. I haven't labeled any activity. I haven't said, oh, this is my musician. This is my artist. I haven't really labeled it like that, because that can infringe, I think, you're right, Larry, on their pursuit of some goal. But I do think it's actually good for them to start seeing that God gave me certain talents and strengths. By the way, all these assessment tests are all strengths. They're all of them are strengths. So I like to be able to tell my kids, here is a way that God has hardwired you to be successful. And you can be successful pretty much in anything you want to go do, but you're going to do it differently than your brother. You're going to do it differently than your sister. So you're right. That is a fine line. It's very astute to point that out. But I think that as long as it's more fundamental, like, here's a label, you're a child of God. Boom, you just got labeled. And that's a good one, right? So, but um this child's highly competent. This child is highly social. Like, I mean, that might be implying that they're not competent or they're not social, right? So as long as these labels are fundamental, foundational enough, I don't think it does too much harm. But it's a good point. You got to be careful, for sure.
Definitely got to be careful with it. I think, because I think you're right. I think you just put that beautifully as like, hey, this could be, you could use this to your advantage if you leverage it this way. It could be harmful if you do it this way. So, with discernment and relationships, so I I'm just curious, like, so we've got, vision, unity, we have metrics and systems, relationships and discernment. That one, as I look at the cover of your book, I'm like, okay, I can see where vision and unity go together. I can definitely see where systems and metrics go together. But relationships and discernment, tell me why you pair those in the same grouping.
I think that they're related mostly in the fact that they're sort of the result of all these other things working together. I mean, I'm
Oh,
not saying that they're
I like
intrinsically
that.
related to each other, but if you got vision and you got unity and you got systems and you got metrics, your relationships are going to be greatly improved, and your decision making processes, your discernment of things are going to be greatly improved. That's sort of why they're at the bottom of the circle, is because they're like the outflow of the other things.
So they're like they're the fruit of the four.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a
Yeah. Now
lot.
let me,
That's really
before we
cool.
turn to discernment, can I hit you with one more thing on relationships?
Let's hit it.
So there's two tools in the book that I think are going to be a lot of fun for the dads out there, particularly. One is called the conflict analyzer. And next time you have a big conflict with spouse, with work colleague, with teenager, whoever it is, neighbor down the street, who, like, if it's in North Carolina, won't like fix the trees that have fallen in your front yard or whatever it is. Next time you have conflict, pull out this tool that you can get on the website, willerfamily.com. And it's a questionnaire. It takes you through, okay, what was this conflict? Describe the conflict. And then it says, what precisely did you say? What precisely were you thinking and feeling? What did the other person say? And what were they likely thinking and feeling? Because you can't read their minds and hearts. How could you have handled this better on your best day? If Saint Connor showed up, how would I have handled it? Is this situation, this conflict, likely to repeat itself? Yes, because they always do. How will I prepare myself to handle that conflict? And what will I do better the next time this happens? Go ahead and prepare for it. And when you work through this tool, first of all, it cools your jets. Okay. Secondly, you just understand the conflict from the other person's shoes. You got to walk a mile in their moccasins, kind of thing. And my 22-year-old had major conflict with his boss, his first boss, about a year ago. And we're at breakfast, and I pulled out this tool and I kind of worked through the conflict that he had just had with his boss. And I really helped him turn the mirror on himself so he could see how he could have handled it better. He can't control his boss. He could have responded better. He could handle it better the next time. So you instead of all this anger being cast out on the other person, this tool will help you turn the mirror facing yourself so that you say, okay, I have to handle this differently next time. I love that tool, right? The other tool is called the relationship maximizer, and every relationship can be maximized. That doesn't mean like your neighbor becomes your best friend, not at all. It doesn't mean that your third cousin becomes your best friend, not at all. But guess what? That third cousin who you don't want to talk to, there's a purpose to that relationship, and it might be to stay. The best maximized relationship might be stay over there, kindly, charitably, stay over there, talk once a year at a family reunion. That's it. But to think about what is the maximized relationship is very helpful. I found it helpful, especially for the people that I don't really want much closer in my life. So, how can I maximize that relationship? Again, maximize doesn't mean bring them closer, it just means have perfect clarity on what that relationship is all about. And that might be a one time a year relationship. It might be a one time a week business meeting, or it might be I need to maximize my relationship with my wife in like every possible way to where we're as intimate and close as possible. So those two great tools in relationship. I think they're just so eminently practical. I'm very proud of them, and I just think guys should use them for all kinds of situations.
Well, even the conflict, like the tool for conflict, I mean that in and of itself, I think is huge because if you think about it, I think a lot of people go to conflict with super high charged emotions, right? And I think one of the things that make lawyers such great arguers and debaters is because their logic. right? They leverage logic. They don't have emotional investment in cases like the defendant or the plaintiff does, right?
Yeah.
So they go in with more logic. But I like that the tool is perhaps maybe it helps you remove yourself out of the emotionally charged situation and maybe look at it from a different perspective.
Absolutely. That's the whole thing is what was this other person likely thinking and feeling? Just that
Yeah.
simple question. That simple question. You'll realize this argument was not what I thought it was in my brain. My brain totally screwed this argument up. I do that all the freaking time with my wife, all the time. And then I step back and think what was going on in her mind and heart. And then I'm humbled. But then I have to ask myself, how am I going to handle it next time? I suck at it, Larry, but I'm trying. I'm trying. That's why I made the stupid tool so I would use it. So, but we can move on to discernment, but I just wanted to squeeze that in on the relationships.
No, I'm glad you did. I'm really glad you did. But yeah, I am curious when you talk about discernment, because I know in the chapters you have 3 chapters on discernment, which is every decision is spiritual, decision making tools for family life, and problem solving tools for family. Um, I mean, that's basically what decisions are all about, is those 3 things. So I would love for you to just start wherever you want to start with that.
Discernment has a spiritual connotation, right?
Right.
And I think we need to understand the car you drive, the vacation you take, where you send your kids to school. Do you buy a new TV? Just all these things. Guys, it's a spiritual decision. I'm sorry, but spirituality, it just permeates every decision we're making in life. We're taking kind of one step closer to God, one step further from God. So I think we have to recognize this is not just a decision in a vacuum. I think there's a moral component to some extent to everything. I mean, even if it's a really small moral component, but we need to understand there's a moral component. That's why I called it discernment, because it just sounds spiritual. Now, there's a difference between decision making and problem solving. Big distinction. Decision making, we use them interchangeably. So here I'm going to separate these out. It's really cool when you kind of get it. Decision making is choosing between A, B, C, right? Do I buy this minivan or that minivan or that Suburban or a 15-passenger church van and be humiliated driving it around town, right? Right. I mean, look, you're laughing, but I mean,
oh, dude, it sounds like the last time we bought a car. Go ahead.
look, I remember the first day. I remember so clearly. My wife had, I think, our 3rd kid, and we had a Tahoe or something. And when we bought a minivan, I'm up in DC. I'm in law school, and I drove that minivan like to CVS to get something for the first time, and I genuinely remember being embarrassed. I remember being embarrassed. I was driving the minivan. I mean, it's so stupid. It was so stupid.
That's
But I
great.
was. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm a cool guy, and I'm gonna see some good-looking girl, and I'm in a stupid minivan or whatever. I mean, it was just so dumb. But
Hey, listen, every guy cashes in his man card the day he buys the minivan. But
I know.
but actually that's not true. He doesn't cash it in that day. He cashes it in officially when he looks at his wife and he's driving it and he's like, this thing actually rides really nice. That's when you lose it.
I know. It's like a truck, but
Right.
not as cool. You can lay the seats down and put all kinds of wood in the back. There you
Right.
go.
Right. There you go.
So no, I mean, so we were in the minivan. We got 15 passenger van. But here's the point: is like a decision. A decision is when you're choosing between those different things, and so you have to decide. Well, so I got a great decision making tool in there, and what it does is it says, okay, what are the variables? I think it's called the decision matrix. So if you're going to buy a car, we'll use that example. You got this minivan, that Suburban. Okay. What are the variables in your decision? Price, comfort, style, like how good it looks, gas mileage, safety,
Safety.
cargo space, whatever it is, right? So you have these variables. Your variables different from my variables. So the tool down the left side of the page, you write in those variables, right? And then you have option A, B, and C. And what you're able to do there is say, okay, now this minivan, how is it on price? How is it on gas mileage? How is it on safety, et cetera, et cetera. And you weight it. So you say from 1 to 10, this car is an 8 on safety. It's a 6 on price. It's a 7 on gas mileage. So you're doing this simple math and you're concluding, okay, this car has a total score of X. and the next car has a total score of Y, and the next has Z. And what you've done, here's the point. Like it's a basic tool, but Larry, what we do when we're making decisions is we get paralysis by analysis. We think about this crap 24 hours a day while we're doing our jobs, mowing the grass, feeding the kids, doing chores, and the thoughts turn round and round in our head. We have 15 texts back and forth with the spouse. Each of us are talking to other people in our life about what car we're going to get. We're living on our cell phones, searching to, doing research and data analysis of all this stuff. And we go in loops and circles and drive ourselves bonkers. A ton of stress and anxiety comes from that because we're not being analytical about it. So when you start using this tool and like put the variables down and turn it into something that's quantifiable, it takes all the guck in your brain and put it on paper and put it into a simple math formula. And then you don't have to go with your final answer on the paper, but you have clarity and your brain can relax. Every single time I use this tool, I go, oh, now I can stop thinking about the stupid thing over and over again. That's the beauty of that simple tool. So that's a decision. And then we can talk about problem solving now, but that's how we do a decision analysis.
I would love to know as we wrap up here. Yeah. The problem solving, because one thing that families have, especially the bigger you get, there's problems.
Yeah. So, okay. Simple thing. How many minutes we got? About 3, 4? What we got?
Yeah, we got about 5.
5. So great little story. It's called The 5 Wives. 5 Wives, not wives.
I was going to say, I was like, wow, where's this?
No. I had 16 with one wife. I promise. I always introduce her as my first wife and she hates that. But, 5 Whys. And so here it goes. True story. Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. The staff is having to whitewash it all the time. And they say, well, why do we have to whitewash it all the time? That's the first why. Well, it's because there's a ton of bird poop all over it. It's bird poop all over that dang monument all the time. Well, why is there so much bird poop? Oh, well, the birds are flying there to eat the spiders. Well, why are they there to eat the spider? There's so many spiders. Why do the spiders like Jefferson Memorial? Why do the spiders like Thomas Jefferson? Oh, well, because there's a ton of gnats and the spiders showed up to eat the gnats. Well, why the hell are there so many gnats? Oh, well, it's because they leave the stupid lights on 24 hours a day, which attracts the gnats, which attracts the spiders, which attracts the birds. Well, why do they leave the lights on? Because no one told them to turn it off. That simple. So instead of whitewashing this huge monument like every year, it was costing a fortune. They said, why don't we just turn the lights off during the day and maybe from 2 a.m. to until the next night. And that solved the whole stupid thing. They don't have to whitewash anymore because the gnats went away, the spiders went away, the birds went away. That's called a root cause analysis. In business, we call that a root cause analysis. It's sort of like a kid. Why is your kid breaking the cell phone rules? Why is your kid flunking algebra? Why every time you talk money, you get in a fight with your spouse? Why? And you can use the tool that I have in the book, The 5 Whys. Just simply ask yourself that repetitive question. And usually in 3 to 5 questions of why, you start to get to the root issue. We're foolish creatures, Larry, and we ask why once, and we say, oh, well, there's just a bunch of birds. There's just too many birds on the planet. That's the problem with the Thomas Jefferson. We stop there because we feel like we got an answer. But little kids in their innocence, why? We have to do that. So that's an example of a problem-solving tool, and there's many others in the book. But root cause, when you're grappling, guys out there listening to this, when you're grappling with the same kind of problems over and over again in your family, and you're confused and you're frustrated, start going through it carefully and methodically to say, is this really the root cause? What's really going on in the heart and soul of those that I love that are causing them to act this way? And if you keep asking why, when you hit the root, it's going to sting. It's like, ooh, I see it now. And now I can address the problem And usually the solution is really simple, like turn off the damn lights.
So I think what you're saying is we actually don't explore, the reasoning enough. In fact, as you said that, I'm sitting here thinking like, wow, there's a lot of times that I don't ask why even once. I'll just automatically tell myself the story of why I think that that's happening. Right.
Yeah.
And then I'll stop there. Do that with my kids, do that with marriage, do that with a lot of things. But yeah, it's like challenging ourselves to ask ourselves, deeper questions of why, we will get to the root cause. I think we're just so quick to make assumptions. Is that accurate?
We're lazy, dude. We're just lazy. And it takes energy to keep asking why. And it actually makes you a little vulnerable because you might get an answer you don't like.
Yeah, there's that.
Boom,
You,
right
you know
there.
what? Right there, man. Like I just, yeah, that we might not stop and ask why. Like, could there be another reason? Because do you think it has a lot to do with the fact that we just want to be sold on our own reasoning so much?
Yeah, but especially as fathers and husbands,
Yeah,
when there's a deep-seated problem in the family, it often comes back to us, and we don't want to confront that.
that is so true. You think this is why us as like we as dads, we kind of like we and we don't mean to do this. We don't mean to say, you know what, I'm just going to go to sleep. I'm just going to check out. I'm just going to kind of like exist here and all this stuff will just be done the way it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think we do. We fall asleep as men, and I think that's really really dangerous. It's staying awake. It's challenging the status quo. It's being there. It's being it's being present for all the good and all the not so good. I think that that's vitally important.
Yeah.
I love this, man. Well, this has been amazing. Like guys, like listen, this has been an incredible three-part series. I've really enjoyed having Conor on. I know you guys have too. Conor, you're going to be speaking at the summit. Actually, as we release this show, you are actually speaking next week. So this comes out on the 11th of October. So we'll see you actually next Friday at the summit, which I can't wait for this because we're going to be helping 200 guys in the seats with your 6-part system here, which I'm so excited. But thank you so much for coming on, man. And is there anything else that we should know, or anything else we should put in the show notes besides obviously what we talked about today, those assessments, but anything else that you want to share?
I'm honored that you had me here 3 times, man. I'm very grateful. Tried to share a little bit of wisdom with your listeners. It's not none of it's my wisdom. I've just picked up everything else, like a mixed martial artist, like grabbing all the good stuff from all the different disciplines, and
There you
that's
go.
my unique ability is to pull all the different stuff together. One thing that we have now is a free consultation. So you go on our website and sign up with one of our coaches, and that you take a little assessment test that we put together for your family to kind of see how your family is in this 6-part system. What are your strengths and weaknesses there? And then you can talk to our coach for 30 minutes, totally free of charge, to just say, are there any tools that we can kind of help your family with immediately? And I want to be able to provide that for free to people so they can get a little uptick real quick and some better performance immediately just by talking to one of our coaches. So, if you want to take advantage of that, you should do it.
And what's the best way for them to find it?
Wellorderfamily.com, just on the website, you'll
Okay.
see, free consultation, schedule
Free
schedule a call. I
consultation.
think there's little buttons that say schedule a call.
Got it. Okay. Well, guys, not to, we'll just put a direct link in the show notes for you. So if you want to schedule a call with Conor's team, you can and get your question. That's really nice of you, by the way, Conor. Thank you for providing that for our audience, man, especially for free. That's really fantastic. So we'll have that in the show notes for you guys. If you head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday 177 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday 177 for this show. Conor, thank you so much, man. As this show releases, I get to see you next week, next Friday in person. Nose to nose, toes to toes. Can't wait to hear you speak. Can't wait to hear you educate these guys on living a well-ordered family. So thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah, keep up the great work, Larry. You're doing a great thing for all those men. So thank you for what you do.
Oh man, back at you, my friend.